let's see what the front pages are doing with this, whether there's that seismic moment when papers are calling it, who they support. Let's find out. So the Metro leading with Rishi Sunak's announcement of a summer election, calling it a bombshell. The Financial Times describes the Prime Minister as abandoning hope for better economic news. The Mail calls the Prime Minister's announcement a big gamble, considering that he's 20 points behind Labour in opinion polls. The Guardian leading with a similar headline. The Eye reporting that Sunak's gamble is an attempt to catch Labour off guard, while the Times reports on his decision to call a general election marking a pivotal moment for Britain's future. And the Mirror features a rain-soaked Rishi Sunak, dubbing the Prime Minister as drown and out. And the Telegraph's headline, things can only get wetter, something I know you tweeted earlier, Kevin. Well, a quick reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for yourself. In the meantime, let's talk more. There's so much to discuss, isn't there? Lucy Fisher, Kevin Maguire are here. Saw your paper there, the idea that things will get worse, not that things can only get better, that we heard here. Is that what drove Rishi Sunak to decide it, if it was so finely balanced even today?
I think that's right. We understand that Rishi Sunak, in discussions with the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, were concerned that the economic picture would not necessarily brighten as much as they had hoped by the autumn, that interest rate cuts from the Bank of England might happen later than expected so that voters wouldn't feel the benefit of it by the time of October, November. And on top of that, Jeremy Hunt's made all these hints about potentially cutting taxes again if there was, a fiscal statement in the autumn. We understand from senior government officials that actually they came to the conclusion there won't necessarily be the fiscal headroom for those tax cuts. So perhaps better for the party to go now for a general election. I imagine there'll be tax cuts promised in the manifesto, rather than have to wait to the autumn and let down, the public who they'd hinted that to, and Tory MPs who'd really been banking on that as a sweetener.
Well, we see the Times there, Sunak bets the House. Yeah. I mean, this really does feel like a gamble, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. It's a very good picture on the front of the Times, number 10 behind, literally betting the House. And say it's an enormous gamble. Have John Curtis, one of Britain's preeminent pollsters, because they're 25 points behind. He says there. They also have Isaac Levido, the campaign chief, saying go long, don't go short. A lot of advice for him not to do it, and Labour MPs are incredibly happy because they thought they'd have to go through the summer and you get worried, you almost got the prize, you haven't quite got it. The longer it goes on, it might slip away. While Tory MPs, a lot of them are going around, why has he done this? Yeah. Some of them will lose 4, 5, 6 months' pay, of course, because he could have gone as late as December. That they'll be off. And so if he's made his decision, but he's perplexed and baffled his own party and he's delighted the main opposition.
The Daily Mail as well, now is the moment for Britain to choose its future. At this time, we wait to see, who the papers are going to back. The famous moment when The Sun decided to call it for Tony Blair back in 1997. Do you sense any shift? Will there be any corrections of the newspapers? Or are they still going to back winners, which is what Rupert Murdoch always famously said he did?
Yeah, they wait. But the Sun very recently...
You think they'd do that the night before the election then?
Well, the last poll I saw, the majority of their readers were voting Labour. So in a way, often a paper has to follow its readers rather than taking the leaders with them. They had a very favourable interview, 2 pages with Wes Streeton, and had a piece by Wes Streeton. Then this morning they had a piece by Rachel Reeves attacking the government. So I think the Sun might be making up its mind. It's got a long history with Keir Starmer, because he was the DPP when some journalists were being prosecuted, although all the evidence was handed over by Rupert Murdoch himself, who was a supergrass. He wanted to keep the company out of the court, so he sacrificed this up. But the Mail is very interesting because that is not tub-thumping for the Tories today. I've no doubt come 4th of July they will back them, but they can see all the problems, and they point out, they quote the senior Tories saying it's a suicidal move. Then they have Esther McVey, the common sense or so-called common sense minister, saying, you've got to wait to allow people to feel the benefits of money in their pockets. And he hasn't done that, Sunak.
Fascinating. Well, quite a contrast from when Jeremy Corbyn was there as the Labour leader and what the Daily Mail did at that point, certainly. Let's take a look at your paper. You know, the economy taking central stage for the Conservatives' campaign. Obviously, inflation coming down. He called it normal today, actually, even though it was slightly higher than economists had predicted and perhaps has an impact on interest rates. Is it about the economy, do you think, for people now? Or have they tuned out of the Conservative offering?
No, I think it is. The economy will be the main backdrop to this election, as it is to every election. I think we shouldn't, lose sight of the fact that inflation today has got down to a 3-year low. It wasn't quite as close to the target threshold of 2% as perhaps Sunak would have hoped, but, not far off at 2.3%. And I think there is this sort of the argument that's been put to Sunak that he found compelling was that there is this runway now to sort of launch the election campaign with inflation coming down, with the economic data earlier this month showing that the country is out of a technical recession, is now growing again. And of course, the other big theme that I think we'll be hearing a lot more about in coming weeks is immigration. And he's finally got his flagship Rwanda deportation policy into law. We could potentially expect to see some flights removing asylum seekers to Kigali just before polling day, which could be, great headlines and pictures for him and for those who want a hardline crackdown on illegal immigration. And of course, the counterfactual, if he'd waited till the autumn, potentially we would have had great weather over the summer and we could have seen record numbers crossing the channel in small boats and leading to quite negative headlines for him.
I think before immigration, probably after the economy, is public services. And the state of public services, particularly the NHS, which is ailing, near record, waiting lists, criminal justice system that seems to be falling apart. The Times had the story today, police have been told to arrest fewer people. And I think that really hurts the Conservatives because it's always been a core issue for them to say they were tough on law and order. And people just feel so much, and Starmer exploits this and goes on about it endlessly, that nothing works in Britain. And I think that will strike home with a lot of people. You're paying more tax, record rate of tax. You haven't got as much money in your pocket, and yet the public services aren't performing as well as you want.
Yeah, you always wonder if Rishi Sunak will rue the day that he didn't actually sort out striking health workers earlier as part of that. Your paper, The Mirror, drowning out, things can only get wetter. It's all there, isn't it? But we heard from Beth Rigby. He's a stickler for tradition. It is traditional to announce an election just outside, steps away from where we are now.
Yeah, well, he's going to pay a price for it. See, look at that image. No one's going to have great confidence in him looking that way. I agree. I watched the coverage of the rally, small Conservative Party rally later. He looked a lot better in that, although I thought the image there, Darren McCaffrey, the Sky reporter, and the camera crew being pushed out by two heavies and the lens being covered, I thought that is not good. It's an election. You want to connect with people. Where's the transparency? Where's the accountability? But I think, right, tradition, well, that's all well and good. But check the weather first. See what time you're going to come out and have an umbrella if you need one.
This is it. I was going to say I saw a great picture today of Barack Obama, holding a brolly, actually managing to make it look quite cool with the rain pouring down. And I think it was a mistake for Sunak to come out without any covering. He could have had an aide holding an umbrella. He could have held it himself. There were other options. But, the pathetic fallacy, it just lent itself to all sorts of ominous metaphors about the storm clouds looming, about his gloomy message,
We've all had too much fun already.
We've had too much fun.
Let's be honest about it.
Kill satire, as we were saying before we went on
the
air.
mass cartoon on the front of the Telegraph is a Tory canvasser knocking on the door saying we're raising money to buy the Prime Minister an overcoat.
In the meantime, a more favourable picture, you might say, on the front of The Guardian, but a very similar headline to the Telegraph, both going on this idea of this being an enormous gamble. It's like turkeys voting for Christmas, going before you have to. And everybody's asking the question, why, including his own party. And it's going to be hard to escape from that question, isn't it?
I think that's right. And, I've spoken to some MPs today, Tory MPs, who are furious about this decision. For the reasons that Kevin outlined, they may see them, lose their seats, lose their income sooner. And just thinking that, Rishi Sunak once said to me, he owns a ranch in California. I don't have that. There will be people turning to kind of the options that Sunak have, whereas they might be left out on their ear. So I think in the days ahead, we might hear more about the repercussions from some of his own backbenchers.
Nobody likes a reckless gambler. Nobody likes a gambler who loses. and there is this feeling he's being a little bit fly on this, a little bit reckless.
Well, even Nadine Dorr is talking about, when US schools start and, suggesting he's going to plan to head to California as part of the reason. Not surprising Rishi Sunak is dominating the front pages, but let's talk about elsewhere. Labour as well, change behind Sir Keir Starmer with the union flag, looking prime ministerial, many have said. But other parties as well, the Green Party suggesting they could win 4 MPs this time, the SNP with its recent difficulties, Lucy. It's going to be very fascinating to see, in all parts of the UK, how this washes out.
Yeah, difficult for the SNP coming so soon after a period of real turmoil before their new leader, John Swinney's had a chance to sort of bed in. Labour hoping to make huge gains north of the border to help them, achieve that huge swing, that huge clutch of seats they need to win in order to get even a tiny majority, let alone a commanding majority that will allow them to govern and really kind of turn the page on the years of tumult and chaos as they're trying to frame it. So, look, I think Keir Starmer today had a very kind of canny backdrop, contrasting himself, quite starkly against Sunak, not only in the dry, but against this very traditional wood panel backdrop, as you mentioned, the union flags, really emphasising this theme of patriotism, because that's one of the main themes he's tried to work towards to rebuild Labour's credibility on, the economy and defence.
What was interesting on that contrast between Sunak and Starmer is Sunak knew what he was going to do and took us by surprise, but it looked like Starmer was better prepared. And Labour had thought it through, how they're going to be with the flags and the panelling and how he looked and how he sounded, and even having party workers in the room to applaud him. That contrasted with the hecklers and the
music.
Things can only get better against...
Except later on, of course, he went to an event space near here. You mentioned Dan McCaffrey being chucked out of it, but actually he had supporters there. One wonders if it would have been just better to make the announcement, this evening from a venue with, Tories around him, Lucy.
Well, he's got to play to the kind of more modern media landscape. You've got bulletins, people kind of, I want to see what's going on in the news at sort of, 5, 6 p.m. and not wait till sort of 10 p.m. So I think he had to kind of stay within the bounds of some convention. But you're right, it was far from ideal circumstances to announce it. And, some of the kind of sketch writers have been having a field day about the soggy announcement, the damp start to the campaign. It wasn't really triggering the starting gun with a sort of projection of strength that I'm sure he and his aides would have wanted.
The umbrella was invented some time ago. It shouldn't be a stranger to him.
The Metro saying Rishi finally names the date, July the 4th. He'd always said second half of the year, but there are some MPs who are not standing down. Tracy Crouch, for example, who found it very emotional because she can't deliver for her constituents what she thought she could do if it was October or, November, as some had suggested.
No, that's right. They all thought they had
a bit longer.
3-4 months to get their affairs in order, also get legislation through Parliament. And they can't now, and so he's cheesed them off, I think is the polite way to do it, but some of them are using rather more earthy language that Ofcom wouldn't allow.
So the deadline's ticking, proroguing next Thursday, correct? Not long to get those bills through. I think there's about 16 of them. What survives in about 30 seconds? Will smoking survive? Post office compensation, what do you think might get through?
Well, I've joined you here at Sky just having come off the terrace in the House of Commons where lots of Tory MPs, including ministers, were having a drink, some commiserating with each other, asking them that question, what legislation will make it through in the 2 days left of Parliament tomorrow and Friday? They think very little. Vaping, the smoking ban, they think that will pass by the wayside.
Yeah, OK, fascinating. Lucy, Kevin, stay there. Lots from you coming up in the next hour as well. We'll take a further dive into some of the inside pages. In the meantime, Prime Minister has rolled the dice, the gamble we saw in the newspapers. There are 42 days, 8 hours and 4 minutes until the country goes to the polls in the general election. Are you ready? Lots more then coming up on the top of the hour, and we'll be discussing the optics of today. Rishi Sunak standing on the steps of number 10 Downing Street behind us in the rain, announcing a general election early for many of his own MPs. The date is July the 4th. Full coverage coming up in just a few moments.